This background music is kind of cool. Hey, everybody, it's Rambling About Cars. This week, we're talking about Honda Civics, we're talking about Mustangs, but we're really talking about Toyota Supras. So tune in. I am Christopher Smith. Chris Bruce is across the way. It is the second episode of the new era of Rambling About Cars. And you're watching us on YouTube on our own channel, Rambling About Cars. Mr. Bruce, yes. Where else can people follow? If you just can't get enough of us on a weekly basis, we have socials. Where all can everybody follow us at?
So YouTube, obviously, you're watching us here at Rambling About Cars. Facebook, also Rambling About Cars. The only Instagram, we are Rambling About Cars. Threads, we are Rambling About Cars. Unfortunately, name issues cropped up, so we are RAC Pod on Twitter.
RAC Pod on Twitter. Now technically X, but it's always going to be Twitter.
I'm always going to call it Twitter.
And folks can always email us. We still love emails, and the email is ramblingaboutcarspodcast at gmail.com. Hey, we got the promos out of the way. We're like we're pros at this. It's like we've done this before.
We have. And again, please send it to your friends. Let us know what you think. We're going to get more last week was the very first show. We're going to get more into the socials and posting stuff there, and doing that in the very, very near future, as in probably later tonight. But yeah, until then, I think we should get on with the show because we got a lot to talk about. We're going to start with some car news, just some few big things that happened. And then our topic for this week is going to be the history of the Toyota Supra. So that'll be a fun convo.
Fun little foreshadow. It hasn't always been the Toyota Supra. I mean, it sort of has. I'm guessing a lot of people know that, but maybe not. Maybe not.
Right.
Not my favorite era of the Supra is this, but the earlier ones where they weren't just Supra, they're among my favorite. More so than probably the most popular. We can discuss that later.
Yeah,
but yes, right now let's talk just a little bit about some news, because there is a thing or two to talk about this week. And I think the biggest is going to be the Honda Civic for 2025.
I was thinking Mustang news was a bit bigger, but okay, let's do Civic first.
Well, we'll talk Mustang in a bit, but I think Civic. I mean, it's the Honda Civic. It's forever young. It's still in the top 20 best-selling vehicles in the United States. And finally, the new generation Civic goes hybrid. We do have the 2025 Honda Civic Hybrid. It's replacing some of the other models in the lineup. You won't have the 1.5 liter turbo for some of the higher level trims. That's now replaced with the Civic Hybrid, the Hybrid Sport and the Hybrid Sport Touring. I think you still get your entry level, your LX, and the Civic Sport. You can still have those with just non-hybrid, the 2-liter engine. But the big news is the hybrid powertrain, because 200 horsepower. And I don't have the torque figure in front of me, but
232 pound-feet of torque.
232 pound-feet of torque, which
is pretty impressive for a compact car. I know we're going to get into it. When Honda promoted it, we were discussing this before the show. They called it the most powerful Civic, non-Type R Civic ever. And they're kind of stretching that a tad. What they mean is the most torque ever.
It's got the most torque.
A non-Type R Civic.
I mean, right now, 200 horsepower, that's equal to the current SI.
Correct.
But the previous generation SI had 205 horsepower. So, when I first saw that, I was a little confused. I was like, wow, Honda, are you just completely forgetting about your previous generation SI? They're referring to torque. And we've seen this from automakers from time to time, where they want to try to make a little bit bigger of a splash. Honestly, I don't think they need to build this as the most powerful non-Type R Civic. I think a 200 horsepower, attractive, practical 4-door sedan or hatchback that can also get up to or close to 50 miles per gallon.
Yep.
That's impressive.
Combined fuel economy. That's not even
that's combined. So city highway. I want to point out that's not completely confirmed yet. Honda says that's what they're expecting the EPA estimates to be. So, I mean, it's probably going to be close, but they're saying in their press release on this should be near 50 miles per gallon. 200 horse, near 50 miles per gallon. Of course, it also gets just a very minor refresh on the front end. The front fascia is a little different.
Very minor. But yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily know it just by looking at it unless you were a Honda Pro and you're like, okay, well, the corner vents are completely different, but it's not something that I think the average person will notice. The taillights, I think, are a little darker.
Yeah, I wonder if this ends up eating into sales of the SI at all. Only because, and I understand the SI is going to have a different suspension setup. It's going to, be sportier in that way. But still, if you walked up to someone and you said you could have two cars with 200 horsepower, but one of them gets 50 miles per gallon too, you wonder how many people are going to be willing to compromise and say, okay, I'll take the hybrid and get 50 miles per gallon, still have the same amount of power and more torque.
No, because I think the SI buyer, it's already pretty good on gas anyways. The SI buyer
probably is.
They're not buying the SI because it has 200 horsepower. They're buying the SI because maybe it looks a little sportier. It drives a little sportier. That's the selling point for the SI. And you won't necessarily have that with the hybrid. Honda does say that they've specifically tuned the suspension for it to be comfortable, but still dynamic, still a fun to drive car. They're definitely pushing the performance aspect to a degree by proclaiming it the most powerful non-Type R. But like I said, the impressive part here for me is, okay, 200 horsepower. It's not going to be slow. It won't be a screamer, but it's certainly going to be entertaining to drive, and it's going to get close to 50 miles per gallon combined. That factors in city and highway. I think those are some impressive figures.
They definitely.
And I can't wait to drive this to see what it's like. We know it's a 2025 model. It should be on sale later this year, but we don't have any information on pricing. I think that's pricing. I mean, it's stupid to say, pricing is important, because of course it is. But I think that's going to be especially critical here. Are we going to see a substantial increase versus the trim levels that it replaces, notably like the EXL, the EX, the touring, the higher end models before that had the 1.5 liter turbo engine that if I remember correctly was like 180, like 181 horsepower, somewhere around there. So with the hybrid, you're getting a little more horsepower, a lot more fuel economy. How much more are you going to pay for that? Maybe the better question is, how much are Honda Civic enthusiasts, loyal Honda Civic owners, how much are they willing to pay for a non-performance version? We know people will shell out a lot of money for the Type R. It's obviously a very special vehicle. The SI was never particularly expensive.
No.
So that's going to be the defining factor for me. I can't wait to see what Honda has to say about price here.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, I bet 2-3 months we get those numbers.
I would expect at the very least. This is billed as a 2025 model, so it should go on sale later this year. If we don't have pricing by like middle summer, I'd be really shocked.
Dude, it's May 22nd. We're
so middle summer. So middle summer, like mid-July, early August.
I think early August would be a good time to look for those numbers. But yeah, I'd be very, very curious to see what it does, because just numbers on paper, it looks like a really compelling product, and
it does. The horsepower with the fuel economy.
Yeah,
that's I think that's going to be a big deal. And it might make some people wonder, okay, do I really need an EV if I can get this good a fuel economy in a hybrid? It could be a pretty big game changer. Let's see how much it's going to cost.
Right.
I think price before we go any further on that.
be a big factor here. So
and from one pricing spectrum to the other.
Yeah.
You can buy a Mustang. You can buy a Ford Mustang, a 2024 Mustang in the $30,000 range. It'll have a 4-cylinder.
Yes.
Which nobody's comparing a Mustang to a Civic, right?
No.
This particular Mustang costs $325,000. It has 8 cylinders. It's very rare. And now we know a lot of people want to get one.
A lot of
Ford
people
announced,
apparently have $325,000 at least to spend.
There's a little bit of shock value with this. We're talking about the Ford Mustang GTD. That's their street legal version of the Mustang GT3 race car that is unlike any other Mustang that's ever come before. Just to refresh your memory, engine over 800 horsepower. They actually haven't said exactly how much is there yet.
Right. They're targeting over 800 horsepower is literally what they say. So
carbon fiber stuff. It's got the crazy wing in the back. It's got the push rod suspension. It has all the race car stuff. It has the transmission moved from the engine to the back of the car to give this nearly 50-50 weight distribution. Just designed to be the ultimate track Mustang, but still legal for the street. They're charging an estimated $325,000. Obviously, it's going to be a very limited production vehicle. And just like the Ford GT that came before it, that this sort of kind of replaces Ford CEO Jim Farley was I can't remember exactly when, to be honest, but he was referencing, hey, we're not doing the GT. The Mustang is going to be our performance car around the world. They have an application process. You don't just go down to the dealer and say, I'm going to buy one. There's an application process, just like they did with the GT.
Right.
That was open for 37 days. It opened in April. It just closed on May 20th. Ford, just today, as we record this, which is May 22nd, Ford announced that they received over 7,500 applications for people wanting to buy the GTD Mustang. Now, presumably, every one of those 7,500 people can afford it. I mean, I suppose you could drop in an application, be like, "Yay, you know what? We'll put it in there. I'll talk to my bank. We'll see what kind of financing I can work." I'm assuming that there isn't anything in there like that, but still, Bruce, 7,500 applications for a car that's going to be very, very limited production. I wasn't expecting that kind of figure. What about you?
And no, that definitely seems significant. And then Ford says that 25% of the people that applied already own a Mustang. So maybe you're right. Maybe these are people who might wish they could buy this car, but can't necessarily get one. But they're building excitement for it. They also, in the same announcement where they're touting the number of applications, they say that they're gearing up. They'll be taking it to the Nordschleife and, presumably try to set some sort of record-setting time, whether, for a specific class or an all-out run or something like that.
Well, we know they've been saying that they think it's good for a sub 7-minute time at the Nordschleife. Which, if that's true, if they go there, and there are even some spy photos, I think, that came out today that show they're already there running it. If it goes sub 7-minute, it will be the fastest American production car that's ever gone around the ring. I think that's the record that people will be talking about, because the current record holder is the 2017 Dodge Viper ACR that, if memory serves me, it did like a 7:01.
That sounds right.
And now we're getting into a whole other topic that maybe we'll do for a future show, because with a track that's as big as the Nürburgring, with as many corners, I mean, yes, a good car, a properly set up car for corners, and something that's capable of pretty impressive speed, that's obviously going to do well. But with so many areas on that track where you might be able to gain a half a second here or a quarter second there. It's like you miss one, you're off just a little bit on one of those many corners, and you could pick up a second, 2 seconds just through the corner. So I mean, there's a lot of wiggle room there. So
yeah. Well, I looked it up.
Do you put a lot of weight into the time? I don't know.
The Viper did it in 7:01.3. So if they're like you're saying, if they're running sub 7 minute times, then that the American made record is already in hand, basically. So
right. And I mean, will it go much faster? We don't know. We don't know. We just know that Ford they're going to make that attempt in the fourth quarter of 2024. They issued this GTD application news, in addition to saying that, okay, applications. Oh, and that's another aspect here. Those 7,500 applications, that's just for the United States and Canada. That part of the world applications are closed down. They're opening applications now for Europe, Mexico, and the Middle East. So there will be more applications still to come. And they're going to make it, the GTD will make its European debut at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And they're going to be doing more testing through Europe. They're already testing at the Nürburgring. So we'll see. We'll see what the GTD is ultimately capable of. But 7,500, Ford, so far as we know, they're going to build this for 2025 and 2026.
Right. 2 years only is what they're saying right now.
Yeah. Whether that's extended, we don't know. Right. When you look through the Mustang GTD application, Ford does say in there the production run they're planning between 300 and 700 per year.
Okay.
So that's 600 to 1,400 total.
Right.
And they have over 7,500 applications. And I did some quick math when I first saw that number. Okay. 7,500 applications. If they're charging $325,000 per car, that's like $2.4 billion. That's a pretty good incentive to keep building the car, right? Especially when your EV division is losing money.
What it costs to build. You don't know if they're actually making any money on this. So that would be another question.
But I imagine if you build 7,500, you'll be making money. It's $2.4 billion. They're not going to build 7,500. Let's just be clear. They're not going to be remotely close to 7,500. Part of the value here is a limited production car. And I mean, it's still a Mustang, right? I know some people might say that like it's a bad word. I know there are people who will see it and hear it and think, oh, who wants a Mustang for $325,000? But this is a completely different animal.
Yeah.
Completely different animal.
You know, the term race car for the road gets thrown a lot and sometimes overly so, but this in terms of Mustang, this is about as close as you're going to get. So yeah,
this kind of is. I had the chance to see one, to see the GTD up close a few months ago when I was down in Charlotte, North Carolina for that Ford event. They had the GTD in one of their little rooms. It very much looks like a race car, outside, inside. So yeah, completely different animal. But that was some interesting news that came up today. I was not expecting to see 7,500 people ready to sign up and get a Mustang. You know what? Let's do Thunderdome. Let's just drop them into a pit, let them fight it out. Give them old Mustangs so they can bash into each other.
Now that
this is a good idea. This is a good idea, Ford. I know, Ford, I know you're listening. I know you listen to the new Rambling About Cars. This is a good idea. Let's just Thunderdome this, man. I mean, you can buy some SN95s. You can buy like some old 4-cylinder Foxes for like $1,000 a piece. Dump them in there. The last 1,200 people standing.
Get the car.
And
the last 1,200 people are the last people who also have $325,000 to spend.
Well, yeah, because
exactly.
We have some other news, Bruce. I've been talking way too much. Why don't you talk about some stuff here, man?
Sure thing. Cool. I get the weird car news. This is probably going to be a short discussion, but it's a weird discussion. Mitsubishi, the brand that a lot of people forget exists from time to time, they made a big announcement this week that they're putting a bunch of money into their US lineup. And part of that is that they are going to introduce 2 new products to the United States, one in fiscal year 2026 and one in fiscal year 2030. And they included the teaser image that I'm showing you guys right now. And the vehicle in the middle, the weird kind of high riding boxy thing, appears to be the Celica DX concept. And I'm going to pull up a picture right now so you can see the similarities. And it just kind of got everyone like scratching their heads in the industry a little bit, because it's like,
it's weird.
Mitsubishi, what do you do? What are you thinking here? Like, the minivan market is not what it used to be. We don't know yet whether Volkswagen's ID Buzz is going to catch on here. So the idea of bringing a weird boxy minivan to the US, I mean, it's a teaser image, so who knows, but it would be odd to show it. And yeah, so just weird car news is always fun.
Well, and
you have a take, like,
do it, Mitsubishi. In the United States, you don't have much left. The Outlander is strong for you. It's working well for you. I can't remember what the sales numbers were for the Eclipse Cross. I mean, it's not tanking, it's not killing Mitsubishi, but it's an entirely forgettable vehicle with a name that people really want to be passionate about.
Yes.
So do something a little different. This thing, this van kind of crossover-y thing, I've said it many times on here. I see automakers trying to play other automakers' games so much.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a vehicle where the other guys could be then forced to play Mitsubishi's game. This all hinges on people actually being interested in this vehicle and buying it. And you know what? There are so many SUVs on the market. This could be a neat alternative, and maybe tone down the styling a little bit from the concept. But yeah, offer it. Do something a little different here. Let's shake things up a little bit. It's not like you have a whole lot else going on.
So one other element that suggests this could be a van is that in their announcement, they specifically say that the 2 new vehicles coming will not be in segments in which the company does not already compete. So they're not going to launch just another crossover or something like that. So 2 vehicles in segments they don't have. They sure don't have a van in the US right now. So,
So van us up, and then, you know what? Hey, bring back a sedan. Everybody's leaving the sedan market.
Sure.
Chevy Malibu, you're gone. Detroit no longer is making any sedan. Well, I take that back. The Dodge Charger will be offered in a sedan coming back as an electric or with the inline-six.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a market there. We know sedans are still on the minds of at least some people. Toyota and Honda, they're still selling them like crazy. Hyundai, Kia, selling sedans. Mitsubishi, you can step in. Give us a new
That's
Lancer.
not something I had thought of, but that's an interesting idea. Is if everyone else is going left, maybe you try going right and do something that no one else is doing. Especially for Mitsubishi, which is not, it's a brand that's kind of been on the ropes. It feels like for years now.
Kind of lost, no real direction.
Yeah.
Just trying to tread water, trying to play everybody else's game. Well, make them play your game now.
Mm-hmm.
Make them play your game. Make Detroit say, "Oh, geez, maybe we should come back out with a minivan and a sedan. Maybe we shouldn't just sell a gazillion SUVs because people want some variety." Give people some variety, Mitsubishi. Do it.
Just an interesting little car story. And so before we move into our topic for this week, which again is the Toyota Supra, I just want to reiterate here. Email ramblingaboutcarspodcast@gmail.com. Facebook, Rambling About Cars. Instagram, Rambling About Cars. Threads, Rambling About Cars. X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, RAC Pod, RACPOD.
Please go there, link us, follow us, share us. We're going to be a little bit more active on the socials here, just doing a little more promo. Bruce and I, we're slowly working back into this whole podcast thing, but we're super excited to do it. And we need your help to do it because we are 100% independent.
We are.
And that makes us special and awesome, but it also makes all the ramblers out there special and awesome.
It does.
So we need your help to step up here a little bit.
Help us build, Bruce, help us grow. Yeah.
Before we go to Supra.
Okay.
I have some special news. And for the ramblers that have listened to us for years, that have followed us over here to the new platform, you'll know what I'm talking about. For the new ramblers, the new listeners, the new adventurers on this crazy podcast that we're doing, I have a project car.
You do?
I've had a project car for like 2.5 years.
Does it run again? Did you get it running?
Let's not get too ambitious here, Bruce. It still has to be a project car. It's a 1995 Ford Taurus show. I've had a dozen of these because I'm sick in the head. This one's kind of special because it was owned by a friend of mine that passed away a few years ago. It's a very special color combination, interior, exterior. It's just like the one that my wife drove back in college. So it needs a lot of help, but it has some nice sentimental value. I picked it up. Let's see. I've had it here for a year. So yeah, it's been 2.5 years since I picked it up. It sat outside for several years. It wasn't running when I got it. Couldn't even get it to turn over. Got it back to my house. It was supposedly parked because of a transmission issue, which I've yet to diagnose because see above, RE, not running.
Not running.
So I'm a pretty busy guy. I at least have it in my shop. And I thought, okay, well, I'll get it turned over. I'll get the engine running and then we'll get going on it. And the weeks turned into months.
Yeah. And as these things happen.
And I couldn't even get it to turn over. And it's like, okay. Took the starter off. The starter seemed free. The starter seemed moving just fine. Okay. Maybe the solenoid is cooked. So over the period of these many, many months, I didn't want to replace the entire starter because I'm a little gun shy. It's like, I don't want to go replacing a bunch of parts only to find the engine turns over and it just clanks like a Model T, right? So I replaced the solenoid, couldn't even get it to crank. The starter wouldn't even engage. Okay. It sat outside, maybe the wiring's bad. I don't know. So finally, I just went ahead. I got another starter and a solenoid. I did find a pretty nasty power wire that had a lot of corrosion on it. Some broken. So I replaced the lead on that yesterday evening, May 21st, 2024.
Okay.
The engine turned over.
Okay.
With the starter.
Yeah.
That's
did
it. That's all.
Did it idle? Did we get that far?
I did not start it.
Okay.
I had the ignition unplugged. Because I just want to hear this thing like crank over. I want to hear, well, first of all, does it crank over? Yes, it does crank over. I wanted to hear, okay, is it clanking, doing a bunch of weird, nasty sounding crap? Okay, no, it's not. Cranks over on its own. I was never so happy to have a car not start. Because I mean, it's been sitting for at this point like 5 years. Just cranking it over, just getting some oil moving around through the engine, splashing around, which I did do an oil change on it like a year ago, so it's got fresh oil in it. So then I thought, well, okay, it's cranking over. I wasn't going to do anything else. Let's plug the ignition in and let's see if this actually runs. So I plug in the ignition. I plug in the DIS module. It's electronic ignition on that engine.
Yeah.
Plug in the mass airflow sensor. Plug in all the other sensors that I had disconnected. Get in the car, crank it up, and it doesn't run. I've got nothing there. It didn't start. Honestly, I wasn't expecting it to start. The gas that's in that tank is at least 5 years old.
Okay.
And I haven't done any other diagnosis on it, so there could be any number of sensor issues. But the primary thing is, okay, that gas is probably just way too stale.
Yes.
And gummed up for it to run. So the next step, at least, and I already ordered gaskets for the intake, gaskets for the cam covers. The whole top end of that engine is going to come apart now. I'll get everything just fixed up, cleaned up, drain all the gas out, replace a fuel filter. I don't think I'll need to replace the fuel pump, but big progress. That was a big moment for me. It at least cranks over and nothing caught on fire. I fully expect, and I'll share photos when I do it. I fully expect to find the biggest mouse nest ever underneath that intake. There's a big valley in that engine underneath that big intake that the animals and critters just love to get into. But that's my story. That's the project car update. It finally turned over with the starter after 2.5 years in my care. So it should be running by like 2036.
Yeah. Hey, baby steps. We'll get
baby steps.
We'll get there.
Baby steps. That's plenty of time for me to say, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm going to go buy a Toyota Celica.
Yeah.
Why, Bruce? Why would I buy a Toyota Celica?
Well, because when it arrived, and actually for an even longer period in Japan, I found out it was called the Celica Supra.
This is true.
We can start diving into Toyota talk here.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Toyota Supra, because
so I prepared just a little bit to give folks some context, because you can't really talk about the Celica. We can't really talk about the Supra without just a little Celica talk on first.
And I'm fine with that, because I love the Celica, except the last one that they did. That I wasn't a big fan of that final generation. But the 70s Celica,
right?
Even into the 80s, the 90s Celica All-Track. I love those cars.
Well, we're not going to.
That's also where the Supra comes from.
Yes, we're not going to dig too much into those, but we are going to talk Celica here just a second. Toyota introduced it into the United States in 1971, the first generation Celica. It lasted here until 1977, again, first generation. And it was Toyota's kind of small, sporty car. They had a variety of engines. Towards the end, they had a 2.2 liter 4-cylinder. And one of the other cool things about them is, so we're looking at a period brochure. This is a full line Toyota brochure that we could geek out
looks
about.
Fantastic too.
Yes. But let me pull up another image here. So yeah, this is from 75. So it says here, 2.2 liter Hemi head engine. Celicas are the hottest little Toyota around. Above is the Celica GT with McPherson front suspension, fat radial, styled steel wheels, power front brake disc, a 5-speed overdrive transmission, full instrumentation, an AM/FM stereo, all standard. And then the model.
Let me just pause for a moment
to
just infuriate all the Dodge listeners out there and all the Mopar listeners. Yes, Toyota had a 5-speed Hemi in the 70s. Actually, a lot of engines have a hemispherical head design. Hemi isn't just a Mopar thing. It isn't just a Dodge thing. My Ford Taurus show has a hemispherical head. So I've got a Hemi Taurus, folks. Anyways, little sidebar. Let's continue, because we're about to get to the really good part of the Celica.
We are. Yeah, I just wanted to give people some quick context for the Celica in the United States before we dove into Supra stuff. So yeah, this is, like I said, this specific documents from 75. They were available here from 71 to 77. The kind of the coolest version was only available in 76 and 77. And Smith, I'm sure you've seen these. The the Celica liftback. Have you ever seen a picture of one of those? Kind of look like a Mustang, or they definitely, the folks at Toyota were definitely looking at American muscle cars for this model, and
it had a very distinct kind of fastback look to it. What is some practicality too with the liftback sitting there in the back?
Totally.
Yeah, that 70s era Celica, very sporty looking car.
Obviously, that's what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, never big horsepower monsters, but there were very few horsepower monsters through this era. I very much love the styling. I'm very, very, very much love these older Celicas, especially. And you're kind of bumping this along just the way I was bumping along my my project car story, especially the Celica Supras. Let's talk about these.
Yep,
because this is where Supra began.
It is, yes. So 78, the second gen Celica comes out. It is its own model for the 78 model year. And then in 79, they introduced the Celica Supra. And at this point, they still look largely the same as a Celica. I have a brochure from the period where they actually combined both models together. But the major differentiating factor was that the Supra, or the Celica Supra, got a 2.6 liter inline-six engine initially, and then later on it got a 2.8 liter inline-six. And to compare that, the Celica got either a 2.2 or 2.4 liter four-cylinder, again, depending on model years. But let's take a look at the pictures, because you can really see that a Supra was just a Celica with kind of a slightly different nose. So here we're looking at the 1981 Celica by Toyota brochure, and this one combines all of the models together. So we start out with Celica. Oh, go ahead.
And this is notable, Bruce, because when the current generation Supra came out, of course, it had the 6-cylinder, but then Toyota offered the 4-cylinder version. And I remember there was a lot of talk. Should that be called the Celica Supra? Because that was really the differentiating factor in the early days. The Celica had the 4, the Supra had the 6.
Yep. So, and here we're looking at it, and you can see it's Supra. The Supra badge is right there on the side. It's Celica Supra even. And so you got the bigger engine, and you also got a 5-speed available 5-speed manual transmission. Here we're looking inside of an 81 Celica Supra, and it's not the best looking cabin I've ever seen. I'm a sucker for a visual equalizer, so big fan of that.
80s stereos, man. Such a classic look for the 1980s. This is my second favorite Supra generation. That first generation Celica Supra, second generation of the Celica. This is my second favorite of them all. We'll get to my favorite here in a bit. I think this is a tragically overlooked era.
I agree.
For the Supra. You don't see much attention. I mean, obviously we know the A80, the 1990s Supra. That's the one that gets all the attention, and it's a great performing vehicle. We'll talk about that in a bit.
Let's do a quick specs comparison.
I would love to see more on the early Celica Supra. I would love to see more people do things with them. I would love to see more respect in general given to them.
So again, this is for the 1981 model year we're looking at. There were, slight changes like every car along the lines, but here it's a really good side by side to see what you got in terms of powertrain when you got a Supra. So again, Celica 4-cylinder, it was a 2.4 liter. It made 96 horsepower and 129 pound-feet of torque. Not by 81 standards, that's not terrible, but it's not great. With the Supra, you got a 2.8 liter inline-six, making 116 horsepower and 145 pound-feet of torque. You can see they basically have identical front and rear suspensions because, they're basically the same car. And then the only other big change...
The brakes though, the Supra had discs all around. The Celica had drums in the back still.
It does. That's correct.
So, I mean, that's a notable difference there.
Yeah, no, but it's not when you think about it today, and especially here in a moment when we get to the second generation, there are significant styling differences.
Yes.
So, but yeah, good to know. Super fun stuff. Let me check my notes here to see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. Let's see here. 2.6. Yeah.
It's such a smooth look for that era. It's like we're just on the cusp of really getting into the wedge
Right.
cars. To a certain degree, the wedges were already coming out in the late 70s, but that late 70s, early 80s Celica Supra,
Right.
you're getting some of those kind of edgy themes, but it was still what I guess what I would call a softer shape. And I just think it looks good from every angle. It really does.
This isn't my favorite shape. I would say the next generation, we'll get to it. This isn't my favorite, but it's all, it's important though. You gotta.
And two, I've always been a sucker for the 4-eye look up front. The two rectangular headlamps on either side. The 4-eye.
Of course.
I like it on the older Fox bodies. I like it here on the Celica Supra. I love it on the old Dodge Daytonas, the Plymouth Lasers before they went to the pop-up headlights. I would rather have the 4-eye than the pop-ups.
Okay. But yeah, you can see here you were talking about that like very early wedge styling. So yeah, this is an 80 or an 81 model right here. And you get, there's the hint of the wedge, but we're not fully there quite yet.
We're not full wedgie.
No. More
the wedgie will come, folks.
It will. But yeah, that's kind of all I had to say about the first gen. But just, very important, establishes the nameplate. But it's basically a Celica with a bigger engine and some more amenities. It's almost more of like, you could almost think of it as a trim level as much as, its own nameplate. At least I would say so.
And now,
yes,
now we're going to get a little wedgy.
Yes, now we're going to get wedgy. 82. The second gen Supra arrives. This is it is still called the Celica Supra.
Yes.
And it now has a 2.8 liter inline six, making 145 horsepower, 155 pound-feet of torque. And actually, by the end of the run in 1986, this one's making 161 horsepower and 169 pound-feet of torque. So we're actually starting to get into decent
that's not bad. If I remember correctly, 86 Ford Mustang, the SVO, the Turbo 4, was making 205, and the GT with the 5-liter was in that neighborhood as well. And this wasn't that far behind without any forced induction.
So we're talking, it is still called the Celica Supra, but and I'll throw up a photo here in a second. The major differentiating factor is that now the Supra gets the pop-up headlights and it gets a much more wedge-shaped nose. So still riding on the same underpinnings as the Celica, but getting a lot more attention in terms of differentiating itself from styling and things like that. And now that's a real wedge.
That's definitely a wedge.
I love the roof-mounted spoiler. And
those look great with louvers on those side windows and the back. I think it's such a classic 80s look. This is my third favorite Supra generation, this era Celica Supra. You finally jump into some, just a better engine with the dual overhead cam, dual overhead cam 6. Previously, it was a single overhead cam. So, that's where you're starting to see more of that horsepower come from. This is, I guess you could really say this is the beginning of serious performance.
Yeah, I think that's totally
in the Supra line, even though we're still talking technically a Celica. This is still a Celica. It's a Celica Supra. And as Bruce said, there are more styling changes that really set it apart from the rest.
Yeah,
I love this era Celica too, though. I gotta say, I love this era Celica. The dashes are starting to get a lot better. Aren't they?
Yes. Well, this generation, let me have to find the image. So they offered what was called the P type and the L type which were separate trim levels. P type was for performance. L type was for luxury. And so you get this super padded leather interior. Like, look at this thing. So yes, this is the Supra L type. And those chairs look really comfortable even today. I gotta say.
A luxury sporty coupe is something that pretty much doesn't exist today. There are just a few scant models. I mean, this is really I don't know if you could call this the pinnacle of like that luxury modernish coupe where it's small, but it's still it's practical to a degree, but it's not really a family car. You're not hauling a lot in the back of that.
No.
I mean, you could certainly daily drive it, but totally. If it's just like you and one other person, it's fine.
Perfect. Yeah. I did want to mention an optional digital gauge cluster was available. So we're looking at that here. Just, a trip. We're starting to get into like wonderful 80s excess. Like, like the stereo is so over the top.
All the switches. Well, hey, the future was switches and buttons and computerized screens. We're really starting to see technology progress through this era. I think the 1980s in general, arguably, I'll say, the most significant decade of automotive evolution, because we see the early transition into the digital era. We hear a lot of people talk about analog versus digital, meaning like, still manual controls, but really we're starting to see a lot of the electronics really step up. We're starting to see a lot of computer control stepping up through the 80s. And that's what brought performance and horsepower back into the equation.
Yep. Here, let me show you these two
very,
images
very significant era.
Right next to each other, and so you can kind of get an idea. So here is the Celica from the period. Okay, it's got those headlights have always been bizarre to me, but you can see kind of the similar shapes. But then here is your Supra, or Celica Supra, I should say.
And I mean, it certainly has a more aggressive look. There's no denying it has a more aggressive look, and it should.
Right.
Yeah, I love this generation. It's my third favorite of them all.
I think I'd put this at number 2 for me.
Number 2?
This is my. Okay. Yeah, I think this is number 2. These are just really, really attractive cars, especially
they are.
In Supra form. The Celica looks a little bit awkward in my opinion, but that's fine. Let me see here. Oh, I did want to share this. So we're talking at the very beginning of this that in Japan things were a bit different. So
as they are,
yes. So they were called what we called the Supra was called the Celica XX over there. And I found this brochure from 1985. And what's interesting is the number of engine options that the Japanese got. So there was a turbocharged model and then 2 variants with 2 inline-sixes with both with twin overhead cams. And you can see the styling's basically the same, but there's some I'm trying to get to it. So 2.8 liter, which is what we got here. So right around about 170 horsepower, which we're familiar with. A 2-liter twin cam, and you notice it's still a 6-cylinder with 160, about 155 horsepower. And then they also got a 2-liter turbo, again an inline-six with about 155. So it's just interesting the different engines options that the Japanese got, whereas we only got the naturally aspirated inline-six.
Yeah, but that changes for the ensuing generation.
It does, yeah. We shall move to
that. Now we are talking about the Toyota Supra. No Celica. Yes. At this point, it is separated. It's its own entity. The Celica continues on as a front-wheel drive vehicle. with optional all-wheel drive. And I love me a Celica All-Track eventually. Yep. I love me a Celica All-Track. But now we're talking about the A70 Supra, pop-up headlights. It's longer. It just has a very smooth look. This is my number one Supra generation of them all.
I will agree with that. So it was introduced in 1986 and a half. It was delayed. And so it was supposed to come out in 86, apparently, but there was a delay. And so 86 and a half is when the first generation of the third gen, also known as the A70 Supra, it sticks around until 1992. Buyers could initially, it launched with just a naturally aspirated inline-six, making 200 horsepower. But by 1987, you could get the 3-liter inline-six turbo that made 230 horsepower.
Yeah, 230 horse. Now, at the time, I mean, consider what's going on in the United States. The Mustang of this era, the top dog Mustang, the GT, that's making 225 horsepower from its 5-liter V8. So this at 200 with a naturally aspirated 6, not that far behind. The Camaro, I think, is making 230 at this point with a 5.7 liter. The Corvette's making a little bit more, but this was never really, I don't think, envisioned as a Corvette competitor.
No, I don't think so either.
So in naturally aspirated form, the Supra is already right there. Now, this is a bigger car from the previous generation.
Yes.
It grows overall. But once the turbo comes in, now we're starting to see a serious performance vehicle that's right up there with everything that we're getting from the Detroit brands. And
unfortunately, I was not able to find a brochure that we could click through for this generation, but I do have some notes written down. The turbos, they came with a limited slip differential, an adjustable suspension system that Toyota called TEMS, TEMS. They had headlamp washers, 8-way adjustable sport seats, power windows, power mirrors, automatic climate control, and then the options included anti-lock brakes, leather interior, and so we are looking at the coupe right here. And of course, in the spirit of the 80s, you could get it with an open top as well. As soon as I find the image, there we go.
Yeah, so, that's such a good looking car. The proportions, I think, are perfect. It's the end of the wedgie era.
There's still a little wedge there. It's not like the previous one.
No, it's not
king of
it's not as sharp, but it's not as sharp. But I mean, we're still talking about a wedge car here. And Bruce, I'm glad you mentioned the various options in the equipment, the suspension, the adjustable suspension, the ABS, a lot of things that you wouldn't find on other vehicles, other performance vehicles, quite of this stature. It made the Supra a very special vehicle, but also a very expensive one.
Yeah.
In top turbo trim, this was $22,600 back in the 80s. That was, if memory serves me, that was just about double the price of a Mustang GT.
I would believe that.
And by memory, I don't mean remembering from the 80s. I'm talking about remembering just through all the various things that I've written on and researched over the years. To put that into 2024 math. Yeah, thank you. A little brain fade there. It's been a long week. 2024 perspective, $22,600 would be $62,738 today. And that's kind of what a new Supra costs.
That's exactly what I was just thinking.
So, I mean, it's a pricey car. I think that's why you didn't see quite as many of these back in the day. Yeah. I don't really remember seeing many of these at all. I mean, in the late 80s,
I remember seeing
I was like 11, 12 years old. I don't really remember seeing them. I didn't really start to love these until like the early 2000s. Just when I started to broaden my automotive perspective and look at things beyond just big old American V8s and realize man, there's this whole other set of cars that I just adore, and this is at the top of my super generation. It's near the top of like all of my of my favorite 70s, 80s, 90s cars.
Sure.
The
Just real quick,
proportions
while
are
we have this
there. Yeah.
this image, I just wanted to point out here is that adjustable suspension systems, TEMS. You had a normal button or a sport button, and that was right behind the gear shift. No longer a graphic equalizer, but still a very cool suspension cassette deck for the time.
Lots of buttons. It still had kind of that futuristic look going on with it there, with a lot of
here's
lot
your
of computerized looking stuff. Yeah, lots of buttons. Buttons, 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 buttons for buttons, man.
Yeah. And then your cruise control as well. So just buttons everywhere. A lot of tech they threw at these cars, and I think you would also
performance themed and very luxurious.
And so when I prepped this, I decided not to do anything about the current gen Supra. It just didn't make. We all know what it is.
We know what it is.
So BMW. Let's talk about the one that I think most people are absolutely most familiar with, and that is the A80 Supra, the fourth gen. And I mean, you kind of don't have to say that much about it. It's kind of, it's a pretty amazing car. It has the 2JZ 3-liter inline-six. That's the naturally aspirated version. That makes 220 horsepower, 210 pound-feet of torque, and you could get that with a 5-speed manual or a 4-speed automatic. There's also the 2JZ GTE, which is the turbocharged version of that engine that makes 320 horsepower and 315 pound-feet of torque. And that, these days we know they were massive. Like, those engines can take so much more power than what they came with from the factory. And
I mean, just typical Toyota of the 1990s, overbuilding everything. Of course we know the engine can just take gobs of power.
Right.
But even in stock trim through the 1990s, that horsepower has it right there, equal or above a lot of the competition. Mustang wouldn't see 320 horsepower until it wouldn't see 320 horsepower in a major production version until 1999 with the Cobra, and even then the power was a little down at first. Ford had to recall all the 99 Cobras to do some fixes to actually get that to 320 horsepower. The Camaro, the Firebird, they were running 320 horsepower up to that point. So yeah, it's right there. It's certainly earned its reputation as a performance machine. I think the interior is one of the coolest aircraft themed interiors of all time. It has that timing. It has that beautiful wraparound feel to it. Really driver centric, driver focused. I love this era Supra's interior. I wouldn't change a single thing.
Big gauges. And in fact, they put the tack right in front of the driver, and then, like you said, it just wraps around you, and everything is facing the driver.
Yes. I love it so much. I would never get out because, and bring on the emails. Rambling About Cars podcast at gmail.com. Bring in your hate email. Drop your hate comments below. I do not like the exterior styling of this generation Supra. It's not, it's not ugly, but to me, I'm sorry, it is not attractive. And I remember talking about this once before, and I remember getting a couple of emails. Oh, you're just trying to be a troll. You're just trying to hit. No, this is my legit opinion, and I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. The proportions are a little off. The front end with its big headlights and just kind of straightforward lower grille, it feels a little out of whack to me. And then you move to the rear with the really wide fenders at the back. And of course, this is where the Supra wing came from. Why is it called the Supra wing? Because it debuted on the Supra, the big, wide, big arcing wing that sort of became a thing for aftermarket in other vehicles. This is where it started. I was never a fan of that. And the backside in general with the taillights. I think it's probably one of the ugliest executions of taillights I've ever seen on a car.
Oh, I think you're going to get hate mail for that. I don't know about it.
Yep, bring on the hate mail. I'll die on this hill. No, in fact, I'm not going to die on this hill because I'm right. I'll just stand up tall and beat everybody down. The taillight execution, not bad or not great. I mean, in profile, when you look at this car, it's just like straight from the side. Okay, it looks pretty good. I'll do that. It still has a very sleek, fastback shape going on. I can handle it from the side. Looking at it from the front, looking at it from the rear, and bring on more hate mail. The engine is phenomenal, and it drives great, but it was never really a good handling machine. It does straight lines great. I'm not saying that it's terrible in corners and you can't enjoy it, because yes, you can. But a lot of people gloss over the fact that it certainly wasn't the best corner carver you could get out there.
No. Even if you compare it against its competitors, the RX-7, the FD RX-7 is kind of considered the king of the crop amongst.
Yep, RX-7 whipped it.
Yeah.
The GTRs, Nissan, whipped it.
Well, that had all-wheel drive, so that helped, but
not necessarily. I mean, you still need to have some design finesse. You still need to have some engineering to make it work. But yeah, the proportions, especially with the front, with those
we're looking at right now, is not a kind image. It looks
it's not straight
really
on
generic car.
Straight on, very little character. Yeah. This is my least. Yeah, I gotta say it. This is my least favorite Super generation, and it's the one that's certainly the most popular. It's the one that people are rabid about, that people will get into fist fights for. You know what? I'm not trying to do it to be a troll. I'm not trying to do it for the clicks. That's just my take. That's the way I see it. And I think I have quite a bit of evidence to back it up. I talked about it right here. The proportions with the headlights. Just that straight kind of bland lower grille and the fascia. The taillights that to me feel like afterthoughts. I've seen worse taillights. But I think there could have been more thought put into the design, especially overall, the way it moves from the front to the back, the way it kind of flares out. And maybe it's because we got so used to seeing more squared off wedgy shapes. Certainly moving through the 90s, we saw just about everything get softer and rounder. Some did it better. R34 Skyline, R33 versus the R32. As great as the R32 is, I like the R33 a lot better. I like the R33 better than the R34. Those are, I think, examples of moving through that era with a good eye for styling and proportion. Toyota just didn't quite hit it with the Supra. They did with the Celica, though.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about the same time as like
an early or mid 90s Celica all-track, man, that thing is that looks great.
Right.
Supra,
Well, so like last week where we showed off some Studebakers, what am I talking about? Some Ramblers for sale. I've got Studebaker on the brain today. I did find 2 Supras for sale that were in pretty good, well, actually very impressive condition, just to show people what they're at, what a really nice one out there looks like today. So let's take a look at those 2 cars and then we'll finish off the show. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't go super shopping, so
I know, but
the last time I checked, you could still get an A70 fairly reasonably.
If there's not a turbo, the turbo is what gets you. But anyway, so I found an 82 Celica Supra. So this would be a first gen, this would not be a first gen. This would be a second gen. and nice dark gray color. But what I really liked is that it has some really good, well optioned stuff in the interior. So whoever got this, they got the leather seats and um the digital dashboard, but it's a manual. So
Nice.
excuse me, a nice little, combination of options there. Um, digital dash.
And what's the price on this? 14,000?
Let me see. I think 14,982. Yeah.
14,900? Okay.
Um,
I mean, you'll certainly pay a hell of a lot more for an A80 in
oh God,
condition
yes.
like this.
Yeah.
I mean, that still feels pretty inexpensive to me. That's not going to be necessarily a performance beast, but I mean, it's not going to be
no.
slow. It's not going to be miserable by any stretch of the imagination.
I mean, all of them, that inline six sounds good kind of regardless.
Yeah.
So, again, it's not a car that you're never going to be able to like daily drive this or anything like that anymore. It's not going to work, but it'd be a really good, just like weekend car. This one has the sunroof and stuff, just, fun little wedge car to drive around.
Yes.
The other one I found, I like this one slightly less, but I wanted to find a cool third gen turbo, and this was kind of the best of what I could find. I found one that was really ratty. This one is 24 grand. It is in Lake Mary, Florida.
Oh, wow.
White is a kind of a great color on these, I think. And this one is, it's a turbo. I wasn't able to get as good of a look as what options this person specified, but you got the velour seats. It is an automatic, which kind of sucks, but still
87,000 miles. I'm gonna do a little bit of an audible here. This is selling through Gateway Classic Cars,
I believe.
I'm not trying to call anybody out, but I see a lot of vehicles go through Gateway that are aggressively priced. I'll say it that way. This car being a turbo, it looks great, but being the A70 automatic, just the regular hard top, I think they're really optimistic on that price, to be honest.
Okay. I still didn't think. The thing is, you're never going to get an A80 for that price, especially an A80 turbo. So it's still.
No. We're still light years under what the A80s are going for. I mean, those have attained legendary status.
Right.
They were desirable before the Fast and the Furious just put them over the top.
Yep.
So yeah, you're still just light years away from that. But I still think they're relatively attainable. Now, maybe 5 years ago would have been the ideal time to score a good condition A70 turbo for a surprisingly low price, but I think they're still a decent buy today.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
What do you think, listeners?
Email us. Actually, what I was going to ask is,
email us ramblingaboutcarspodcast at Gmail.
Exactly. What do you folks think of our new topic-based format where we do a little news at the beginning and then we kind of do a topic at the end? Let me know. Also, let us know if there are any topics you think would be cool to cover. I know we did the Rambler last week. We did Supra this week. They're not all going to be just about a specific car. To be honest with you, I saw a third gen Supra and I'm like, I want to, research.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Twist my arm to talk about an 80s. Yeah,
Supra. It was just at the grocery store. It wasn't, and I saw it. I'm like, I want to do a bunch of research about those and talk about them. So that's why we're doing that. That's why it was Supra this week.
The sky is the limit. We are still rambling about cars. Yeah. Emphasis on the rambling. That can be pop culture. That can be just cars in movies. That can be movie cars. That can be, what's the coolest car you've seen at your neighbor's house? That can be car shows. That can be anything related to cars. That can be little scale model cars, which I will probably be talking about at some point because I have a whole lot going on there. That can be just just car culture in general. Bruce, you've said it before in the previous iteration of Rambling About Cars. You don't have to own a car or own a special car or own a quote unquote collectible car, desirable car to be a car enthusiast and to have a valid take on cars. You can have a collection of Hot Wheels that you adore. That's fine. That's part of the culture. It's part of cars. It's part of cars, and we want to ramble about it. So
absolutely,
tell us what you want to hear about.
That's going to be the show for tonight. But yeah, podcast or Rambling About Cars podcast at gmail.com. Please send us stuff there, topic suggestions, feedback. And yeah, we'll be hitting the social medias more this week.
Of course, we'll have links down here in the YouTube description where you can go get us, email us, comment, do the thing.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. And with that, we will see you next week.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.